All right, so today we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Heaven, hell, and purgatory.
You got it.
We got all your research right here, and looks like you've got some serious questions about the Catholic take on the afterlife.
Yeah, it's one of those topics that just fascinates people.
For sure.
I mean, across cultures, across time, everyone wants to know what happens after we die.
Right, exactly.
And that really gets to some core questions about how we live now.
Absolutely. So let's try to shed some light on these concepts. Maybe we could at least get started with a 5-minute deep dive into these ideas.
That's good.
Okay, so first up, heaven.
Okay.
Now, your sources describe heaven as being in total union with God.
Right.
But, like, what does that even actually look like? It's
Yeah.
got to be more than just, like, clouds and harps, right?
Definitely. I mean, in Catholic thought, heaven isn't really thought of as like a physical location.
Okay.
It's much more about a state of being, a
Oh,
state of pure joy and ultimate fulfillment, being completely connected with the source of all love and goodness.
So it's not so much about a physical place as it is about a spiritual state of being.
Exactly. Think of it like a state of perfect understanding and love,
Right.
where every desire is fulfilled in the presence of God.
Okay, that's a pretty powerful image.
Yeah.
But some of your sources bring up a question that, honestly, I've always wondered about.
Okay.
If we're united with God in heaven,
Mm-hmm.
do we still, do we lose our individual identities?
That's a great question.
Like, who are we? Are we still ourselves in heaven?
Yeah, and there are a lot of different theological interpretations of that.
Okay.
I mean, some sources emphasize this kind of merging of the individual self with the divine, and others stress the preservation of the individual identity within that union.
Huh.
So there's not one easy answer.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense.
But it really makes you think about, like, what is the self
Yeah,
and what continues after death?
exactly.
And, that kind of brings us to the flip side.
To the opposite end of the spectrum.
The other side of the coin, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Your research really highlights this Catholic view of hell as the consequence of choosing separation from God.
Yeah, and that's pretty intense.
Yes.
But what does that mean? What does it really mean to choose separation from God?
That's a good point. And it's not necessarily like a single dramatic decision. Like one day you just decide, nope, I'm separating myself from God.
Right.
It's really more about consistently turning away from God's love and grace throughout our lives.
Interesting.
It's about prioritizing our own will over God's will
Okay.
and ultimately choosing a path that leads us further and further away from Him.
So it's less about like a one-time decision and more about like a pattern of choices.
Precisely.
Okay.
And so hell in this context is less about, a fiery pit.
Right. All the fire and brimstone and devils and all that.
Exactly. And more about the absence of God's love,
Okay.
which is understood to be the source of all joy and fulfillment.
I see.
It's a difficult concept to grasp, but it does underscore the gravity of our choices and how they can shape our eternal destiny.
For sure. It makes you really think about the impact of our actions, not just like, today, tomorrow, in this life.
Yeah.
But in the afterlife too, potentially.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered heaven and hell. Let's move on to purgatory.
Right.
Now it seems like you're really interested in what this purification process actually involves.
It's definitely a fascinating concept.
Yeah.
Purgatory is basically for those who die in God's grace but still need some purification before entering heaven.
Like a waiting room.
In a way,
Oh.
yeah. I mean, some sources even use the analogy of like a spiritual car wash.
I've heard that one too, yeah.
But it's got to be more than just a quick rinse, right?
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, while the exact nature of purgatory is a matter of a lot of theological debate,
Okay.
it's generally understood as like a process of cleansing and growth.
Okay,
It's not a second chance to avoid hell,
gotcha.
but a way to prepare the soul for the perfect union with God that heaven represents.
So if it's not hell, is there suffering in purgatory?
That's another good question.
And how does the concept of time even apply in this in-between state?
Yeah, again, there's no definitive answers here.
Okay.
But some theological interpretations suggest there's a kind of purifying fire,
Oh, wow.
a burning away of imperfections.
Okay.
Others focus on a deepening awareness of God's love and a growing detachment from earthly attachments.
So it's more about an inner transformation.
Exactly.
Okay.
And as for time, it's probably best to think of purgatory as existing outside of our normal understanding of linear time.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's not like you're, waiting in line at the DMV.
Right, exactly.
It's a different kind of time.
So it seems like purgatory raises even more questions than answers.
It does.
But it definitely adds another layer of complexity to how we think about the afterlife.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of exploring these concepts.
Totally.
They challenge us to grapple with some of life's biggest mysteries and consider the deeper meaning of our actions and choices.
All right, so after this whirlwind tour of heaven, hell, and purgatory, what's it all mean?
Right.
I mean, we've just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, just a little 5-minute deep dive.
Right, but these ideas about the afterlife, I mean, they're complex,
Yeah.
often challenging,
Right.
but they really push us to think about the meaning of life itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So after hearing all of this, what do you believe happens after we die?
Well, I think that's something that everyone has to answer for themselves.
Right.
And it's a question that's been pondered for millennia.
Absolutely.
And there's no easy answers.
No easy answers.
But it's certainly worth exploring.
It is.
And it's a question that deserves our attention.
Well, I think that's a great place to leave it for today.
Sounds good.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
You got it.
And we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.